So let's look at, we'll do a couple of the sections today. I won't overload you with it, but then we can come back. So the first clause that we're going to look at here is the context of organization. So this basically just says what I've just said, which is we need to understand our own context. There are things that we need to be able to be able to articulate about ourselves. And again, it's an easy win for a client, right? The ability to write down who are you? You know, what do you do? What are your objectives? What are your goals? As I say, what's your culture? Here it wants us to look at in what it's calling internal and external issues. Internal and external issues are almost like risks, really. And I'm going to show you how we do this later, not today. Today we're just touching on what it wants to see. So what it wants to see is that we've looked at our information security management system, we've looked at our organization, and we've said, yes, these external things may have an impact on our ability to deliver information security. So external things could be legislation, changes in Brexit, changes in GDPR. External things could be relationships with stakeholders. You know, have you got a funding board that sits over the top of it? Non-exec directors. It could be physical and environmental, something in the environment that's around you. So it's just saying, look, have you had a looked at your organization in the wider whole, and then adapted your information security management system to address some of that? And the first way that we would do that is to identify that in a document and then apply that to a risk register and then manage that through risk potentially. But we'll touch on that another day. Internal issues are things normally, again, we are going to show in our implementation internal issues, even if they're not an issue. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're going to show that we considered them. So what an auditor likes to do, right? Auditors, again, right? Let's come back to that. So auditors, like, they like to find things, right? Sometimes we leave them things to find. Otherwise, they get sad and upset and they think, oh my God, like, I'm adding no value here. Sometimes the things that they pick up on will be pedantic as hell because they can't find out on anything big. But things like internal and external issues, if I put in there internal issue, potentially we don't have the resources to run an information security management system, but we have taken on board a third party. Is it on the risk register? No. Then we've assessed it. If you don't do it, they'll just ask you. They'll just say, okay, so when you were looking at your organization, did you consider Brexit? Did you consider GDPR? Did you consider internal resources? You're like, yes, we considered it and we wrote it down for you, fella. Look, it's there. And oh, damn, on to the next one. So what this is like second guessing what it is that they're looking to pick up on. And again, provided them information in a way that's going to smooth and ease that process through. Okay. Clearly, it does add some value, right? I mean, it is going to add some value, but that's a big part of what we're trying to do. Let's go back to that. Understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So again, we're starting to look at things like our stakeholders, our stakeholder analysis and what they want to see. We've got information on that and an approach to that. We're going to define the scope of our information security management system. And we're going to implement this process of continual improvement, right? Scope. Getting scope right is absolutely key, right? So as we've discussed many times, there are smart ass professionals within our community who say 27001 isn't worth the paper it's written on, because you could just say that this broom cupboard over here is 27001, and therefore how does that make you any more secure? And then you go, technically you are correct, you are technically correct, but the question that you always ask anybody is, are you 27001 and can I have a copy of your scope statement? Because what I want to know is, what is it that you certified? And then actually you ask them for a copy of their statement of applicability as well, because you want to know the controls they've applied. But those two, the scope statement documents, are key. So when we're working with our client, we're going to say we're going to document, and we need to document the scope. There's a structure and a template for that. We're going to try and restrict the scope to the minimum requirement that the organization has in the first pass, especially if this is the first pass. Oh, we want the company to be 27001. Okay, nice aspiration. So you want to go through the full rigor of all of this in relation to like your CRM, marketing databases, finance databases, things nobody's bothered about, really. You want to go through all of that rigor? No problem. Let's push it out by 2 years, because you've got too many things now in play. How do we define scope? The way that we define scope, or the first step to defining scope, is what is your client asking you for, right? Because we're only going to do whatever it is we're being asked for. If client says to me, you build widgets, right? Are you 27,001? And you go, oh yeah, I'm on 27,001 for booking holidays. He goes, but I don't book holidays with you. I buy widgets, right?
Yeah.
So we are going to do the scope around widgets. That's what we are going to define our scope for. That's what we're going to go forward for certification for, because it meets the requirement of the end customer. If our customer doesn't know the answer to that, then we will have a process that says, what are the products and services that we deliver, and which one of these is the one we sell the most of, that we want to put that band and that badge on. So there is a process we can go through to help them, but it should become self-evident. They'll be like, whatever it is that they deliver to client, that's the only thing that client is interested in, is what I am buying from you to secure the supply chain is that 27,001. So that helps your client to define what it is that is their scope. So we've got templates that look at scope. And then in the context of organization, it's looking at continual improvement. Now, again, we've got a structure. We touched on that on the last session, where we talked about, on the left-hand side, policies, procedures applied to staff having incidents. Incidents lead to continual improvement. Internal audits, they lead to, and external audits, they lead to continual improvement, etc. That we report that back to the management review meeting. Management review meeting makes a decision, maybe adds it to a risk register, etc. So I'm not teaching you continual improvement right now, but I'm saying that the standard wants it, it calls it out specifically, and that we have that built into it. Let's go back to the map. The next section is leadership. So I'm flipping in and out, because it's better to look at me than look at a spreadsheet. You can read the spreadsheet later. So the ISO standards, again, they're about that management buy-in. And this is I think it's a good thing of, many good things I like about 27,001, from risk management, but also that demonstration of leadership and leadership buy-in. It wants to see that it's baked into the objectives of the organization, that it's well communicated, that there is buy-in at that senior level. So there's a whole heap of things that we're going to do in our ISMS to help to drive and evidence that. Things that we're going to have in terms of, contracts of employment that say certain things, the way that we've recorded what resources are allocated to demonstrate that we take it seriously. We've allocated resources to it, and we can show that. We're going to have things like a communication plan that shows when we're going to discuss things and when we did discuss it. In our information security policy, we've got a chief exec statement. Now, I always say I provide a templated version of that. I always do say try and change it to make it your own words, because I think I've been on 15 audits where every CEO says exactly the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, they're all saying the same thing. That's fine. Maybe they're all aligned in the zeitgeist, right? They're like looking at me, shaking their heads. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. So, but we're going to show that demonstration, right? We're going to show that we've got that leadership commitment. So there's a whole section here that looks at leadership, and again, that's mapped to the documents. So I don't need to worry about that until we get into each document. So I'm showing you in here policies. We're going to have a suite of policy statements of what we do, not how we do it. How we do it is covered in procedures. We logically separate what we do from how we do it. That enables us to be able to share what we do externally, because it won't have GDPR confidential data in it. It's not going to have mobile phone numbers in disaster recovery policies. They're going to be deep within the plans. So we're going to logically separate that out. We're going to have a pack of policies that for a small organization can sometimes seem as overkill. But the reason that we've got a clear desk policy, a software policy, a physical security policy, a change management policy. Some of them are only 1 or 2 pages long. Yes, it can seem as overkill, but the reason we've done it, again, as you grow, you can allocate a policy to a person or a department. So not everybody's updating one massive document. And we want to do that. We want to allocate policies and documents to owners for accountability purposes. It also allows us to satisfy questionnaires. If you've ever been involved in them, they will call these documents out by name. Do you have a change management policy? Do you have a clear desk policy? So rather than sending them a 50-page one document, you know, we send them what they've asked for. We go, yeah, change, bang, gone, bang. So we are going to have a process. We're going to have a series of policies that explain to the business what they do. We've got a process at the back of that about communicating that. We can't expect people to operate in a way unless we tell them the way that we expect them to operate. And that's one of the things that policies does. It says, this is what we expect of you. Outside of my gift and my remit and above my pay grade, there's a whole conversation about HR's ability to discipline if you haven't explained to somebody what it is that you expect them to do. So if you have a data breach and you say, oh, you emailed everything out to all the customer, an employee says, well, you never told me not to. What are you going to do? How are you going to discipline them? They're just going to go, okay, now we'll tell you now. Now we'll get some policies in place.
Yeah.
So there's a whole HR reason for policy as well that sits at the back of that. Then we've got a piece around organisation roles and responsibilities. And again, we're going to document some of what those roles and responsibilities are. Okay. So in terms of today, with 10 minutes left, I'm going to call it there. You'll have to remind me next week how far we got, because I will forget. But we're up to planning. So we've just finished off on the leadership side of it. And I'll just carry on walking through what the expectation of the standard is so you can get a feel for it. You'll have the document that's mapped, so you can always go back to it. And then when we get to the next stage, it's then to go through each document and say, right, we've now got this document called the risk register. How does it work? But you understand the context of why we've got it, because you'll see here in the standard that it's asked for it.